Well, welcome back. Chapter 12 this time. This is one of the most interesting chapters in my mind in the entire book, though it's all great, I think. Right? Because protecting data as it traverses the internet or while it's stored on your computer is one of the network security professionals' most important jobs. Cryptography technologies protect the company's data, and they convert it into unreadable format. These are our objectives this week. After completing this chapter, you'll be able to do all of these things. The point I want to make then in all of this is that the 4 goals of cryptography are in these objectives. The goals are confidentiality, integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation. So confidentiality ensures the data remains private while at rest. Integrity ensures the data is not altered without authorization. Authentication verifies the claimed identification of the user. Non-repudiation provides assurance that the message originated from the sender. These objectives today accomplish the objectives of, or rather the 4 goals of cryptography, CIA and non-repudiation. So understanding cryptography. Cryptography is the process of converting plain text, which is this readable text, into a safer text, which is unreadable, or we call encrypted, right? So cryptography can be used on data that should be accessible to only certain users. Cryptography then is used to hide information from unauthorized users, and decryption then becomes the process of converting ciphertext back to plain text, right? Also known as readable text. So first, the history of cryptography, right? So some Egyptian hieroglyphics and ancient monuments, they used encryption, right? So parts of the book of Jeremiah even were written using cipher or a key known as the Atbash, right? That's about as deep as I can go there. But it's interesting that this has been going on for a long time. And the cipher, the simple cipher reverses the alphabet using A with Z, for example. So this type of cryptography is called substitution cryptography. Julius Caesar developed a similar substitute cipher by shifting the letter 3 positions, right, which is interesting. Even the Kumasatra recommends that men and women learn and practice the art of cryptography. It's everywhere, isn't it? So the history then continues. The study of breaking encryption algorithms is called cryptanalysis. And it is taught by universities, government agencies, etc. But hackers also find the challenge intriguing. And so when a new encryption algorithm is developed, cryptanalysis is used to ensure the breaking of the code is impossible, or if you're a hacker, that the breaking of the code is possible, right? And we're going to see that in the development of symmetric and asymmetric algorithms later in this lesson. Even Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States and the author of the U.S. Declaration of Independence, he got into it. Thomas Jefferson invented a wheel cipher in the 18th century that the Navy later developed and used during World War II and named M138A. Now, speaking of World War II, war machines get into it, right? So the most famous encryption device was the Enigma machine, and this was used by the Germans during World War II. Well, how did it work? Well, the operator typed a letter that was to be encrypted, and the machine displayed a substitution character for the letter. Now, the operator then wrote the substitution character and turned a router or a switch, and then they entered the next letter and again wrote down the substitution character the enigma displayed. So what they transmitted over the airwaves, of course, was the message that could only be decrypted by another enigma machine. So they added a step to the process. Also during World War II, the Japanese got into it and developed a notable war machine called the Purple Machine. Now, cryptography is to hide information from others, right? And so these are methods that of hiding that used encryption, some of them, and some of them don't use encryption. In the previous, we've talked about those that use encryption. One that doesn't use encryption is called steganography. This is a way of hiding data in plain view, like in a picture or a graph or a text. So we have cryptography, which is the hiding of information from others, and that uses encryption. And then we have that doesn't use encryption, like steganography. Now, some key terms to know: cryptography, encryption, and decryption. I thought were all very important. Now, if you're wondering the basic definitions of the cryptosystem, plain text, ciphertext, what is a key and an algorithm, those definitions are here. Pause this slide and review it at your pleasure. Okay. Now, understanding the symmetric and asymmetric algorithms that go with the process. So modern cryptography uses encryption algorithms to decrypt the data. Banking does this, the web does this, wireless systems do this. And so encryption algorithm is just a simple it's not simple, but it's a mathematical function that works with the key. And the algorithm's strength in the key's secrecy, it determines how secure the encryption data is. So key strength is very important. The greater the key strength, the better the encryption. And we're going to see that later as we go from 64-bit to 128-bit to 256-bit encryption. So in most cases, the algorithm itself isn't a secret, right? People know it. It's public. N times n minus 1 divided by 2. Boom. There's an algorithm, right? What is secret is the key. The key is a sequence of random bits generated from a range of allowable values called the key space. That's what's really secret. So a good crypto system for your risk register would be high key space, high work factor, statistically unbiased, or sometimes called high diffusion, high confusion, and one of my favorite terms, obfuscation, right? High obfuscation will be making it hard to understand the encryption process. Sometimes security itself creates more security by simple obfuscation. That's kind of a joke I use, but it's funny. Obfuscation, very important concept. So those are some other definitions I think are valuable to know. Those make a good crypto system. Now, next then we turn to understanding symmetric and asymmetric algorithms. So as I said, the larger the key space, the more keys can be created and the more secure it is. For example, in an algorithm with a 256-bit key space, this has 2 to the 256 power possible keys. So the more random keys that can be created, the more difficult it is for hackers to guess which key was used to encrypt the data. So simply put, a crypto system converts the plaintext into ciphertext, and the key has to be protected. And if it isn't protected, the hacker can then decrypt the message. So we want a longer key strength to manage that. Now, symmetric encryption uses the same key for both encryption and decryption. Asymmetric encryption uses 2 different keys, and we call use to encrypt and the other used to decrypt. We call this the public key cryptography, or PKI, public key encryption. And then the hash function is the third type, and this accepts an input message of any length, and through a one-way operation creates a fixed length output and creates a hash, or what we'll call later a message digest. Now, symmetric algorithms have one key that encrypts and decrypts the data. So it's just one key doing this. There isn't a key pair like in asymmetric encryption. So one colleague will encrypt, and the colleague must have a copy, the other colleague must have a copy of the same key to decrypt. So if the user wants to encrypt a file message and send it to another colleague, a different secret key it is not the option here, right? You have to have the same key. It's the one key that encrypts and decrypts. And so you have a key transfer issue, which can be solved, but just know that it's an issue. And so if hundreds of colleagues, this is the real issue, if hundreds of colleagues are placed in the equation of keeping track of which key to use, it becomes a big problem for us, right? To calculate the number of keys needed to support the encryption system. And so the way we do that is a formula called n times n minus 1 divided by 2, where n is the number of people involved in the process, right? And that, so the more people involved in the process, the more keys that you're going to need. So another problem with secret keys is how to send one to a colleague so that they can decrypt your message, right? Because two users have to have the same key in symmetric algorithms, there's really no way to know which user sent the message, right? So in other words, symmetric algorithms don't support authentication and non-repudiation. That was summarized in the previous slide under symmetric algorithms. So symmetric algorithms are fast, though. That's one reason we use them. They are perfect mechanisms for encrypting large blocks of data quickly, and they are difficult to break if a large key size is used. Now, symmetric encryption looks like this. So Bob wants to encrypt. He takes the key, takes his plain text message, uses the encryption algorithm. It encrypts the message. The ciphertext is transmitted. Nobody can read it. The keys are the same, so Alice gets it using the same key, takes that message, decrypts it, and now she can read the plain text, right? So the pre-shared key, also known as the shared key or the session key or the secret key. It goes by several names. And so, but just note, we don't use the term private key. That's actually associated with asymmetric encryption. But it does go by the name shared key, pre-shared key, session key, and secret key. Now, continuing then with symmetric algorithms, right? The two types of symmetric algorithms are used currently are stream ciphers and block ciphers. Now, stream ciphers operate in plain text, on plain text, one bit at a time. It's in a stream, so every bit, everything, basically, right? Which makes these algorithms great candidates for hardware or chip level encryption, because there's a lot to encrypt when you're doing it one bit at a time. Now, block ciphers operate in blocks, right? So sometimes when a block cipher separates into blocks, it does it by padding, right, to fill in a given block. And we will come, and DES. DES is a type of algorithm used. DES is the Data Encryption Standard, DES. This was what NIST wanted as a means of protecting sensitive data that was otherwise unclassified. And we will come back with this in part 2.